지금 제가 입고 있는 화이트 라벨 맨투맨과 백팩은 버려진 플라스틱 병을 모아 재사용해서 만들었는데요. 보다 나은 지구를 위해선 플라스틱 병을 제대로 분리배출하는 작은 실천도 필요합니다. 우선 내용물을 비우고 뚜껑을 제거하고 라벨을 제거해주세요. 아주 간단하죠? 여러분도 노스페이스 화이트 라벨 에코 캠페인에 저 김요한과 함께 참여해주세요.
우리는 왜 행복할까요? 다 마신 페트병을 다시 깨끗하게 만들어 재탄생시키기 때문이죠. 제품의 생산, 유통, 판매, 회수까지. 제주개발공사와 함께 우리의 지구를 지켜요.
Carbon footprints are driving climate change to unsustainable levels. Imagine a carbon-free world where with technology, we don't leave any footprints behind. We're developing eco-friendly technology and creating the path to sustainability and a better world. Sustainable solutions for Earth, for life, for you. 한화.
첫 주인에게 버림받던 날, 난 그리 슬프지 않았어. 버려질 수밖에 없는 나는 플라스틱 페트병이었으니까. 난 사랑받을 운명이 아니었어. 어쩌다 운 좋게 재활용 원단이 될 기회를 얻었지만 다 헛된 희망이었지. 선택받지 못해 또다시 창고에 버려졌거든. 그렇게 체념한 채 소각장의 갈라를 기다리는데 말이야, 이상하게 이런 마음이 생기더라. 누군가의 옷이 되어 사랑받는 기분, 한 번쯤 꼭 느껴보고 싶다고. 이런 날 네가 구원해줬지만 가끔은 불안한 마음이 들어. 유행이 지났다는 이유로 다시 버려지게 될지 모르니까. 너에게 부탁 하나 해도 될까? 너와의 행복이 계속될 수 있도록 나를 오래오래 입어줘. 지구를 사랑하는 당신에게, 당신을 사랑하는 옷으로부터. 리 텍스타일 by WWF.
제2차 P4G 정상회의를 서울에서 개최합니다. 국제사회와 함께 탄소 중립 실현에 앞장서겠습니다.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to the P4G Green Technology Session. I'm your MC, Shin Ah-young, and it is a great honor to welcome you all to tonight's P4G Green Technology Session. Joining us today are experts from around the world, from global companies, research institutes, and global organizations to discuss the critical role technology is playing and will continue to play in making the world carbon neutral. The theme of today's session is Green Technology, Pathfinder for Carbon Neutral Society. As a special pre-session of the 2021 P4G Seoul Green Future Summit, we are excited to be leading discussions that will become building blocks for creating a greener, sustainable future. So thank you all once again for being with us today. Today's session is divided into 3 subsessions, the themes of which are action, challenges and opportunity, and partnership. In each subsession, speakers from domestic and global companies, global research institutes, and international organizations will be sharing their expertise and insights. So please stay with us until the very end. Before we start, Minister Im Hae-suk from the Ministry of Science and ICT has kindly sent us a video message. Here are Minister Lim's opening remarks.
안녕하십니까. 과학기술정보통신부 장관 임혜숙입니다.
Good afternoon, I am Lim Hae-suk, Minister of Science and ICT of Korea. I'd like to welcome all participants joining this special session held under the theme Green Technology Pathfinder for Carbon Neutral Society. It is regrettable that we cannot meet in person due to COVID-19, but I'm glad that we can have this virtual meeting where the international society comes together to address climate change. My special thanks go to the keynote speakers and panelists of today. Distinguished participants, the strain on global growth and environment is opening an era of transition with carbon neutrality at its center. To respond more actively to the climate crisis, the Korean government made a pledge to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 last December. Technological innovation has a critical role to play in our transition to a carbon-neutral society with cross-cutting social efforts at its base. There are research findings that claim innovative technologies will contribute to 76% of greenhouse gas emission reduction required for the 2050 net zero goal. Countries around the globe are making R&D efforts for carbon-neutral technology innovation. To foster technological innovation for climate change response, Korea has established the Act on the Promotion of Climate Change Response Technology Development and the Carbon Neutral Technology Innovation Promotion Strategy. Building on these institutional foundations, Korea's public and private sectors will actively increase investments to complete an enabling ecosystem for carbon-neutral technology innovation. Korea is also strengthening its ties with diverse countries in the technology sector. The government plans to expand technical cooperation with countries from Asia, Africa, Europe, and beyond in policy development and technology development and demonstration to jointly respond to greenhouse gas emission reduction and climate change adaptation. In particular, later this year, based on close cooperation with UNEP, a CTCN liaison office will open in Incheon City, Korea, which also houses the Green Climate Fund. I am certain that this will facilitate global cooperation on climate technology, which is underscored by the UNFCCC. Distinguished participants from home and abroad, the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit will be held from May 30 to May 31st under the theme Inclusive Green Recovery Towards Carbon Neutrality. The Green Future Session, a P4G special program, will serve as a venue for discussing the role and future of technological innovation, which is a critical element of carbon neutrality, while identifying the challenges of green technology and their solutions.
정부는
The Korean government welcomes all valuable comments made today and will reflect them actively in future policies.
세션이
I hope today's
독립을 위한
session provides a meaningful chance that strengthens global partnerships and prompts more opportunities for carbon neutral development. I wish health and happiness to all participants who joined us online and offline. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Im, for your kind words. Now, let us start our first session. The topic of our first session is the private sector's carbon neutral strategy in green technology. Shin Hak-cheol, CEO of LG Chem, Melker Yanbury, President and CEO of Volvo Construction Equipment, and Tim Brooks, Vice President of Lego Group, will give their presentations. LG Chem was the first in its industry to set the goal of carbon neutral growth by 2050 and is currently working strategically to meet its goal. So, before we welcome our first speaker, Mr. Shin Hak-cheol, let's watch a video illustrating LG Chem's vision and commitment to a carbon neutral future.
I'm honored to be a part of this prestigious event to talk about how LG Chem is approaching carbon neutrality goal. As we all know, industrial activities, if we include heating and power generation, are responsible for bulk of carbon emission. So the industry should take the proactive leadership role in setting the specific reduction goal and deploy all possible carbon reduction technologies. In this vein, I proposed a three-pronged leadership action framework for global industry leaders to tackle this issue during my climate action speech at 2021 World Economic Forum. And that is to commit, operationalize, and engage. CEOs should commit themselves to each company's specific carbon reduction roadmap through preemptive declaration, and then follow up with specific action plans and milestones to achieve the goal. And also constantly engage, cooperate, and communicate with many other stakeholders. We all know innovation and technological breakthrough will be the ultimate solution to achieve global carbon neutrality goal. We need to continue to support and promote science and engineering community to come up with new-to-the-world innovation in commercializing low-carbon technologies. In this regard, industry, academia, and government all has a unique role to play to achieve the common goal. LG Chem emitted 10.6 million tons of CO2 in 2019. Our analysis showed that if we continue to grow at current rate without major carbon intervention, we'll be emitting 40 million tons per year by 2050. we declared last year July that we will hold 2050 emission level at 2019 level, and that means 30 million tons of CO2 in 2050 should be removed from our company. To put that into perspective, 30 million tons of CO2 reduction is equivalent to the amount of CO2 generated by 12.5 million vehicles annually. To achieve these ambitious reduction goals, we deployed the full range of direct, indirect, and compensatory reduction tactics. Some of the key steps we are taking include: 1. Achieve renewable energy 100 status in all of our global sites. 2. Achieve zero landfill status in all of our global operation. 3. Replace fossil fuel-based raw materials with bio-based ones. 4. Develop and deploy low-carbon technologies such as carbon capture utilization to directly reduce carbon from our manufacturing processes. 5. Focus on using recycled materials in terms of achieving circular economy. 6. Deploy digital transformation tools like AI to further improve energy efficiency by 20% from 2019 level. As we speak, we are implementing our plans at all fronts. For example, we are testing biomass and green hydrogen to replace conventional fossil fuel in our chemical plants. We are also co-developing carbon capture utilization technology with Korea Institute of Science and Technology. Some might ask if all these steps are economically feasible. My answer is that it depends on how you look at your time horizon and how you define various stakeholder interests. Today, much more focus is placed on balanced stakeholder interests and longer-term horizon than just current quarter financials from ESG standpoint. This, combined with inevitable steep price on emitting and moving carbon footprint around, it should not only be economically feasible, but can also be elevated to distinct competitive advantage for the enterprise. LG Chem also views the decarbonization landscape as a huge untapped blue ocean type of new market opportunities, waiting to be exploited by those who are willing to put a stake in the ground and blaze the trail for truly sustainable material solutions for all kinds of new and emerging applications. This is truly a leadership moment. Climate change needs determined commitment and actions by leaders from the industry, government, and society at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shin. Carbon neutral growth by 2050. Yes, to reduce carbon dioxide emission and ultimately reach carbon neutral growth by 2050, companies must change the way they generate, use, and store energy. It is, as Mr. Shin said, an ambitious goal, but it can be achieved. So thank you for walking us through the steps that LG Chem is taking. Now, our next speaker is Melker Janberg, President and CEO of Volvo Construction Equipment. Volvo Construction Equipment is committed to building a safer, sustainable, carbon-neutral society through technology. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Melker Janberg.
Dear Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so proud to be invited here today and to be able to participate. We live in a rapidly changing world. The societies are into major transformations, and we are all facing the biggest challenge of our time, the climate change. What we do today will impact the future for all coming generations. And that is why I feel it's so important to participate here today in this P4G summit. As a world-leading manufacturer of construction equipment and construction solutions, we play a very important role for society. We have a big impact, and we also are very important for the society to work. But we also have a very big responsibility for for our CO2 footprint. So we have set very ambitious goal to be a fossil-free company 2040, and we have committed to the Science Based Targets initiative to help us reach our goal. Volvo Group did the first environmental policy already 1972. And we have always been very committed and taking our commitment to the environment very seriously. I think it's important to act, to do what you can, not to wait for others to tell you what to do. Act because it's the right thing to do. So 2007, we had our first CO2-free plant. We were the first to commit to the Climate Savers program initiated by WWF. We showcased the first emission-free quarry a number of years ago, the electric site that we did together with our customer Skanska. And 2019, we committed to an electrical future for our compact machines. And last week, we showed our first hydrogen fuel cell lab. The list could be longer, but I think it's even more important what we're going to do forward. There is no doubt that the electrical machines will play an important role for the construction equipment industry. We have a very clear roadmap, and we have already now started to produce and deliver electrical compact machines to our customers, and our mid-size machines will come next. For heavy construction equipment, I think the fuel cell electrical solutions will be a better fit. So a number of months ago, Volvo Group and Daimler joined forces about developing and producing fuel cells in a joint venture called Cellcentric. Another important partnership that I'm really proud of is with the Swedish steel maker SSAB. And it's about using their fossil-free steel into our products. And that's important since we look at our complete CO2 footprint. So partnership is the new leadership. And one very good example is here in South Korea. We are a proud selected partner into the Seoul Smart City. It's a governmental funded research initiative, and it's about the real life testing of construction solutions for the future. This kind of collaboration is urgently needed. Driven, engaged and brave governments and policymakers is important for the development of the infrastructure going forward. So again, it's important what we do individually, but even more important what we do together. At Volvo CE, we are passionate about making a difference, to build the world we want to live in. It's important for our generation, but even more important for all the coming generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yambury, for sharing your passion for the environment. Volvo Construction Equipment's 100% net zero carbon dioxide emission goal by 2040 is sure to bring a better future for all of us. Now, our last speaker of the first session is Tim Brooks from Lego Group, the #1 leading company in the toy industry. Please welcome Tim Brooks, Vice President, Environmental Responsibility of Lego Group.
Hello, my name is Tim Brooks and I'm Vice President of Environmental Responsibility at the Lego Group. And I've got a few minutes to tell you about some of the work we're doing to create a sustainable future for the builders of tomorrow. I'm going to take you through a quick introduction of our company, some of the initiatives that we're working on and some of the targets we've set. So our company is a family-owned company founded way back in 1932. We have over 17,000 colleagues globally. We're operating in 140 companies, and we're the biggest toy company and one of the most reputable brands in the world. If you don't know our products, they are the most iconic interlocking Lego bricks. You'll find them across many ranges, both from Duplo product, which is for younger children, all the way up to adults. And we often say our products are for ages 3 to 99 and beyond. All of our work and our company philosophy is rooted in our brand framework, and that really puts children as our role models. Right at the center is our belief in that. Our vision and our mission is to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. We really believe that the children today, the skills and some of the thoughts and approaches they have, and we can help shape with them, will turn them into the adults and the leaders and the teachers and the parents and the police officers of the future. So how we work with children today and how we bring learning through play to them is critically important. And our vision in doing that is to be a global force for bringing learning through play. We believe that when children play, they learn. Underpinning all of our work is our 4 promises around making great products, our play product promise, treating our partners fairly, our partner promise, treating the planet in the best way and having positive impact, our planet promise, and treating our employees in the best way, which is our people promise. As I mentioned before, children really are our role models. We put them right at the center, and in return we get thousands of letters every year from children telling us some of the challenges they see in the environmental and social world, some of the things that they want Lego to play our part in doing and in taking care of the planet. And we find these letters so engaging. We pin them up on our notice board and we use them to inspire us every day. And it's really important that we live up to their expectations and do our best to show them that we are a responsible business. I'm going to deep dive on one of our promises that I mentioned earlier, which is our planet promise. And this focuses on a range of social and environmental responsible actions, coalescing or focusing around the 2 SDGs of 4 on quality education and as we work on learning through play, and SDG 12 on responsible consumption and production. And we really use those to drive all of our programs. I'm going to specifically dive onto number 12, which is our more environmental around responsible consumption and production. It's not all words. We've put significant resources behind sustainability and on the environmental and social agendas throughout the years, going back many, many years. More recently, announcing our investment of $400 million up until 2022, and those investments and focus will continue to 2032 when we're 100, and of course beyond as well. Specifically on our environmental agenda, we break it into 2 parts, circular economy and sustainable materials on the left there, and climate impact on the right. So we have committed to move towards circular products and packaging by design. We want to develop new business models that keep Lego products in play, and we're already piloting one of those, Lego Replay, which we have rolled out to Canada and the US, where we take back Lego bricks, we clean them up, and we donate them to charity, and we hope to roll that out to many more countries, and that keeps Lego bricks in play and out of landfill. We want to innovate on new materials. We're already bringing in bio-based materials into our portfolio, and we're actively looking at recycled materials for Lego bricks as well. We also want to remove single-use plastic from all of our packaging and products, and we have committed to do that by 2025. And our commitment is to use sustainable materials by 2030. On the climate side, we are running zero impact operations by 2022. That's our goal. We've already balanced our energy needs with renewable energy already in 2017. We also want to reduce our CO2 impact in our supply chain, and I'll talk about that in just a second, as well as zero waste to landfill by 2025. So a whole series of very, very solid environmental commitments to enable us to strive closer to that goal of zero environmental impact. We know that climate change poses one of the biggest risks to society and the planet, and we're committed to stepping up our efforts here. In yellow here, you'll see scope 1 and 2, and those are our own operations, and that's what we have already balanced with renewable energy with significant investments, nearly up to $1 billion through our parent company, Kirkby, on renewable energy infrastructure. On the green there, you'll see our scope 3 emissions. They make up about 90% of our total 1.2 million ton footprint of carbon dioxide every year. And that's where over the years you'll see us stepping up more and more in engaging with our supply chain, where of course the majority of those CO2, the CO2 sits. We've recently committed to a science-based target of 37%, just over 37% by 2032. And that requires us, of course, to go into our supply chain and take further action. And that will put the LEGO Group and play our part in keeping global warming within 1.5 degrees. So I hope you can see that we have a wide range of initiatives and very strong targets, all of which are really aimed to put children at the center and really try and do our part to take care of the planet for children today and for future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Thanks to LEGO, our future generations will be able to learn about the value of clean society and green technology by simply playing with the 100% biodegradable and plant-based plastic bricks. Thank you to our speakers. This concludes our presentations for the first session. Now, we've put together a discussion session with our speakers. The panel discussion will be moderated by Mr. Tyler Roche. Tyler is the brand ambassador for the Worldwide Fund for Nature and the author of There Is No Second Earth. Take it away, Tyler.
Thank you very much, Ayong. Hi there, everybody watching from home or work or wherever you may be. It's always great to be in a forum where we can actually have some in-depth discussion about how we're going to go about solving the climate crisis. Let's bring our speakers on the screen so that we can slowly move into our discussion. Thank you three very much for your presentations. I have two questions for each of you to reply to. So basically what I want to get into is how your companies came about making the decision to go carbon neutral and what your main priorities are. I know that you did touch a little bit on priorities in your speech, but for the first question, you know, you're all from very influential, very large global corporations. And a corporation is not an individual, right? So when you come to making decisions, you can't wake up the next day and say, oh, let's go carbon neutral. It's got to be a process. There's got to be tons of different factors that are involved for you to come to that decision. So what I want to know is, what is the underlying motivational factor that got your organization to say, we have to do this now? You know, that's different for every company. I recently learned that Amazon came to make their decisions regarding the climate because their employees actually got their shareholders to vote on it. And they got 30% of their shareholders to vote that they needed to talk about it. And that's how they influenced the company. So I'm curious to know, how did LG, Volvo, and Lego come to say, let's go carbon neutral? Was it your leadership, your shareholders, your customers, the market, or maybe it was good for your bottom line? There may be multiple factors, and I think explaining this might help other companies out there figure out how to make similar commitments. So let's hear first from Mr. Shin at LG Chemical. What was the underlying motivation for your company to make this commitment?
Thank you, Tyler, for the great question. If there's any underlying motivation, it's actually quite self-explanatory. Petrochemical industry is one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gas. So when I took CEO position at LG Chem in 2019, it was this very harsh realization that unless we took our own initiative and proactively pursue carbon reduction strategy, the very foundation of our future business will be in great jeopardy. We thought we need to turn carbonization or decarbonization landscape into a distinct competitive advantage as an enterprise. And I think we are trying to find a way to do that because all of our competitors are basically subject to the same regulatory hurdles and requirements. So the fundamental thinking, Tyler, that led us to proactively declare our 2050 carbon neutrality goal and action plans is that realization of our future. Now, those goals and action plans are now fully integrated into our business strategies. We are also planning to thrive in this low carbon economy by creating new high growth opportunities in many areas of eco-friendly products and solutions. So, in a sense, we'll act in agile and nimble manner to make this ambitious plan a reality.
Thank you, Mr. Shin. How about Mr. Yanberi at Volvo? How did your organization come to make those commitments?
First, I must say I was very inspired listening to Mr. Brooks here from Lego talking about the children and your vision of rebuild the world. And actually, we have something that we call our higher purpose in the company that is about building the world we want to live in. And I think the world is changing, the society is facing so much challenges, and we all see the biggest challenge of our generation now with the climate change. So first of all, I think there is obvious need to change, but also for many different stakeholders that there is a wish, a pull. We want to change. To your question, Tyler, I think it's obvious. It's coming from employees, it's coming from customers, it's coming from owners, and also from the society and the planet as a whole, so to say. So as a big global company, I think we have a big responsibility to act, and we have a big responsibility also to hand over both the company, of course, but also the planet to the coming generations in a good shape. So when we talk about the higher purpose of building the world we want to live in, that's not only a slogan. It's something that really challenge, guiding us, and also motivate us a lot in the day-to-day work.
Thank you. And how about you, Mr. Brooks? How did Lego come to make those commitments?
Yeah, as I said in the video, I think we've been on this journey for many years. I think easily the late 90s, early 2000s, and we set our first energy goal back in 2006. But I think when we say we want to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow, that has to mean something. I think historically that was about bringing learning through play and creativity, and it still is for the Lego Group. That's our core sort of function and reason for being. But to say that consistently and honestly and say, what is that tomorrow that children are inheriting? How can we as a toy company promote the idea that engaging with children turns them into these great adults of the future if we're not at all thinking about that future that they're going to inherit and our responsibility? And that's where it's rooted at us. And we certainly don't want adults in the future looking back and saying, those companies that we loved so much, what did they do for the world that we've inherited? How did they play a part positively or negatively? So that's where it's rooted. I think as a family-owned company, sustainability has always been part of our DNA and ambition. I think, as everyone else has said on the panel, it's a multifaceted reasoning as well. Of course, we know it's the right thing to do. It's anchored in children. It comes from, honestly, the thousands of letters we get. But of course, it's also, there is legislation coming, if not now, in the future, and we want to see more of that and more consistent legislation. There is, pressure, rightly so, from our retailers who sell our products, from parents. It's across the board, and we also need to amplify that even more, and those pressures. And I think we also look to other leading companies like the ones on the presentation slate here today as well.
Thank you. It's actually really interesting to hear all three of your responses to that question, because even though sometimes the logic is a little bit different, it sounds like basically it's an existential decision. As a corporation, maybe it's for your business model or the industry that you're in, maybe it's multi-sector, or maybe it's, as with Mr. Brooks, what you just said about Lego, it's almost philosophical in a way, but at the end, it seems that this climate crisis is really touching people, not just in terms of individuals, but also getting to corporations in terms of an existential sense. So when it comes to actually applying technology and achieving these commitments that your corporations are making, I'm sure, and I've seen in your presentations, we've all seen in your presentations that you do have some sort of specific goals and priorities. You know, multiple of you have mentioned landfills. Are there any specific actions that your corporations look at and say, these are absolute priority? We are taking these actions as 1, 2, 3, top 3 actions that we're looking at right now. Do you have any specific actions that your organizations view as utmost priority? Let's start with Mr. Brooks.
Yeah, thank you. I think it is a 1, 2, 3 essentially. I mean, the first action we can take is getting our own house in order, and how can we be out there in the world trying to lead, trying to inspire if we don't have our own company in order. So we have been working, as I said, 2006 first energy efficiency target, ramping that up, really driving down our energy use, driving down our waste, targeting our waste to landfill, driving down our water use, plus adding in where we absolutely can renewable energy on our own portfolios, rolling out solar panels to all of our factories globally, ground source heat pumps, all of the relevant and appropriate renewable energy technologies as well. So that, you know, really trying to get to grips there. And then I think the second challenge is then coming into our supply chain. And that is the big challenge for us and many companies. 75, 80, 90% of people's footprint are sitting in the value chain, in the supply chain. For us, it's just under 90%. And that's where we're sort of starting to step up even more in engaging with our suppliers, trying to share knowledge, trying to create a collaborative dialogue there. And I think the third part, and arguably you can also say it's the first, is setting very clear goals and targets. Our science-based target is one of those. Just last year, committing to a 37% reduction on CO2 across our entire value chain. So for the very first time, communicating that to scope 1, 2, and 3, not just to scope 1 and 2. And those are, as well as all of the internal targets we have on our own performance. So, you know, if you want to reverse it, is set the targets, get your own house in order, and then really have that engagement with your supply chain, however hard that is. And it's not an easy thing to do, but you certainly do need to engage there.
Right, talking about supply chains, you know, it's not just a question of what you're doing, it's getting everybody else to get on board with you. So then, how about Volvo? Mr. Janberg, what is Volvo looking at in terms of priorities? I know you mentioned in your speech partnerships with a zero fossil fuel steel company. That's actually really fascinating. What kind of priorities is Volvo looking at?
First, you said it's about first setting goals and have great commitments, and we have committed now to become a fossil-free company by 2040, and by that contribute to the Paris Agreement, of course. But if I should simplify or take out 3 actions, because that is what you're asking for. One is that we have said already 2030 we should have 35% of our product sales electrical, and that will be both battery electric and also hydrogen fuel cell electric, depends on application and products. Secondly, I would say new kind of partnerships. We are focusing a lot on that. We are starting a lot of different partnerships within the industry, with academia, with governments and other companies. So I think that's very important in the future to have the needed speed. And one partnership that is connected to today then is the smart city in Korea, in Seoul, where we appreciate a lot the initiative and where we will be able to show also new technologies in the construction equipment. And thirdly, actually, I will choose people. And I think we all need to organize and make the right prerequisites for people to be able to contribute to this question, because there is a big wish and pull for each and every one to be able to contribute. And then we have a big responsibility to have the right culture and the right setup in companies so everyone can contribute. And I mean, individually, we all can do a lot, but then in the end, it is, of course, how we do this together, both within the companies, but also together with governments and policymakers and others, so to say.
Thank you. How about LG? Mr. Shin, what is LG Chemical looking at in terms of prioritizing actions? What type of actions are you guys prioritizing?
Right. Tyler, I think we are still closer to the beginning than to the end because we are very ambitious. We talked about carbon neutrality by 2050. We are aiming at 2050 net zero around the entire spectrum of scope 1, 2, and 3. So we still have some work to do. In my view, establishing numerical baseline by product and by process through life cycle assessment, I think is a big first step toward implementation because we cannot improve what we cannot measure. Then deploying engineering and R&D resources to enable direct carbon reduction from our manufacturing processes is a very big step in addition to scope 2 and scope 3 reduction. We need cooperation, collaboration, and engagement on all fronts to make that happen. Industry, academia, government, and society. Because for the most part, we are depending on breakthrough technologies that do not exist today. It has yet to be developed and commercialized to achieve our carbon neutrality goals. So we need shared vision and almost a dream in all R&D and engineering community for rising to the occasion and coming up with those breakthrough innovation solutions in low carbon technologies. And we also need decisive actions from the government and society in further enhancing renewable energy infrastructure in terms of availability and economics.
Thank you. Thank you all for your responses. It's interesting because basically partnerships seem to be really important for all of your companies. I guess that's why P4G exists. We have a little bit more time, so I'd like to toss out another question for anybody who would like to grab it. You know, your corporations are clearly making a lot of commitments and moving forward, but not everybody is doing that. Right? Not every corporation around the world is saying, let's go carbon neutral and making those decisions and looking into those partnerships. So if you were to give any advice to someone at home who is watching right now, who works for a corporation that could make that kind of choice, what would you tell them to do within their organization? What advice would you give them to try to convince their company to make strong commitments to going carbon neutral? Anybody want to take a swing at it?
Maybe I can take a swab at it. We talked about this as a matter of existential threat, and it is. There's no other way of describing it. And I think realizing that may not take a whole lot of effort by anybody in the industry. So the question is how to make that happen. So I think the CEO, the leader, should take a definite role in making that happen. And cascading down throughout the organization. And in that sense, my three-step proposal for CEOs to commit, operationalize, and engage, I think is a good framework to work from.
Thank you.
Maybe I just can add here to Mr. Chairman. I think the commitment is, of course, extremely important. I think also that we should be humble in the different speeds that different organizations will do this. And I think it's important to also have a debate and discussion inside the companies. Why are we doing this? Why are we committing to this? And why do we put up these actions and goals? And if the feeling in the company or in the management is that you do it just because you are forced to or someone else tell you to do it, then I don't think the result will be good. So it's better to wait a number of months or something and then you commit to something that as a management but also as a whole company that you can achieve. So not stress to the commitment, but it's better to walk it through first and then do a real commitment that you can fulfill.
Thank you. Mr. Brooks, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think, covered already, but definitely, I think working top down and bottom up within an organization, what are the leadership principles? What do the leaders of your organization hold themselves accountable for on climate? And hopefully you're going to get that leadership, and hopefully you are able and empowered to write to your leaders or engage with them if you're not getting that leadership. And then I think there's the other part of it is working bottom up as well. What can you do in your area of your business, whether that be procurement or engineering, or and that's certainly where we see a huge amount of groundswell in Lego of people really grabbing hold of this agenda. No doubt empowered by our leadership, no doubt empowered by our family-owned company, but really grabbing hold of it themselves. Myself as a sustainability professional, in my small team, I can't change our company on my own. I need everybody, all 17,000 employees, to play their role. And in Lego Group, they are really stepping up to do that and taking that mandate themselves. And I think even if you don't have that senior level leadership, can you start at that bottom? And what difference can you make in your department and your area?
Tyler, can I just add one thing? It's not a commercial at all. It's about partnership. And actually, we have a great partnership with Lego. So we are building and seeing a lot of this, talking about rebuild the world or building the future we want to live in. So thank you for that great partnership as well.
No, and I think that's part of it. I didn't even get to the models and the ability to engage children, whether it be through Volvo or through our partnerships with building model wind turbines and all kinds of things of how we can engage in a fun and playful way as well as part of our leadership position.
That's a great success, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Actually, this is all the time we have for this session, but I can tell that all three of you are very passionate about what you do. I'm sure that your commitments and your actions in your companies will be very inspiring to people who are watching this discussion today. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that was inspiring. And that's not it for today. We have 2 more discussions coming up. I hope you're looking forward to it.
Thank you, Tyler. Now, let's start the second session. The topic of this session is potential of green technology. From the policy and technological development point of view, we will examine carbon-neutral policies of forward-thinking governances such as that of Sweden, Denmark, and the European Union, and discuss why, especially from the developing countries' point of view, technology transfer is so important. Our first speaker is Måns Nielsen, Executive Director of SEI, Stockholm Environment Institute. Stockholm Environment Institute is a global environment policy research organization. Let's welcome Dr. Måns Nielsen.
30%. That's how big the share of industry in global CO2 emissions is. 30%, a significant number that is set to increase as the world seeks to industrialize. But instead, the number has to go down. The IPCC's so-called 1.5 report showed that catastrophic climate change can only be averted if we reach net zero emissions by mid-century. That is also the goal that countries committed to in the Paris Agreement. The good news is that governments and companies in a wide array of industry sectors are working on reducing their emissions. And this is precisely what our joint study with the Green Technology Center in Korea and the Leadership Group for Industry Transition, LEAD-IT, is analyzing. The study is an important contribution to help overcome hurdles and share insights. It brought together Korean experience with EU, Swedish, Danish, and UK experiences. We see the transition all around us, whether it's the construction sector in Sweden, where I come from, the cement sector in India, or the chemical industry in Japan. Companies and industry associations are producing and implementing roadmaps in which they set out their pathways and action plans to reduce emissions. And you can go and see these roadmaps yourselves in the transition tracker commissioned by the Leadership Group for Industry Transition, or LEAD-IT, as it's called, which is hosted by the Stockholm Environment Institute. Right now, the transition tracker shows only one roadmap for Korea. It's the government's national roadmap for greenhouse gas reductions by 2030. But this is about to change as we speak. The Green Transition Alliance brings together Korean companies with Swedish ones, with Scania, Volvo, or IKEA, to name just a few. Although 13 Swedish companies have committed to sharing their experiences in developing transition roadmaps. And Swedish companies developed their roadmaps with the support of an initiative called Fossil Free Sweden. This example showcases the first success factor out of 3 that I want to mention today. Success factors drawn from our joint study with GTC and the experiences from Lead It. So the first one is international cooperation. This is key for bringing emissions from industry from 30% down to net zero. And we see this not only bilaterally between Korea and Sweden. Both countries are members in the Lead It group that now brings together 15 governments from Argentina, Australia, Austria, to United States and United Kingdom. But the main point in this leadership group is not that it gathers countries. The point is that it brings together countries and companies. Lead It provides an arena for public-private collaboration so that companies and countries can improve their collective understanding of the opportunities and challenges in industry transitions. What applications of green hydrogen are emerging in certain industries and clusters, and how can we build green hydrogen value chains? What can governments do in terms of creating demand for green industrial products, be it green public procurement or carbon contracts for difference? Could global and national roadmaps be a tool to establish the shared vision of low-carbon cement? What knowledge gaps do we need to address to increase materials efficiency, material substitution, and recycle and reuse? These are the kinds of questions that companies and countries gathered in Lead It all grapple with, and all commit to find answers in joint working groups and other fora. Public-private collaboration, that's the second success factor I want to stress. In our joint study with the GTC, we reviewed some of the public-private partnerships forms and policy mixes that are receiving a lot of attention today. Let me get back here to Fossil Free Sweden, the initiative that has brought together more than 170 actors in the form of companies, municipalities, regions, and organizations. An initiative that the Swedish government set up with the aim to increase the pace of low-carbon transition. In 2017, they initiated this program to cooperate with business and industry sectors to develop their own roadmaps for fossil-free competitiveness. Through this program, 22 industry transition roadmaps were developed by the Swedish sectors to show how they can enhance their competitiveness while at the same time reaching climate neutrality. Industries set their own targets and milestones, and they are responsible for the visions and proposals to remove the obstacles that are presented in the roadmaps. And government actors that were informed about this through the connections with industry partners, they are asked to support this transition by putting incentives and enablers in place. This brings me to the third success factor, public policy. You will agree that major systemic shifts are needed to achieve net zero emissions. And of course, while it's absolutely crucial that private stakeholders do their bit to shift, governments play an essential role to put in place a policy environment that allows companies to shift. Subsidies, carbon pricing, the right regulatory frameworks. This is a big piece of this puzzle, but also R&D policies, innovation policies, and creating niche markets to allow the new solutions and technologies to grow. These instruments are at the government's disposal, and our joint study with GTC shows that the mix of policy measures are needed. Using these instruments in a coordinated and coherent manner creates the stable conditions and dependability which private actors need. So policy, public-private partnerships, international collaboration. These are the three success factors to get industry to net zero by mid-century that I'd like to leave you with for now. In the panel discussion, I look forward to diving deeper into the question about policy, what it can do to encourage technological development, what developments we're actually seeing today that are changing the industry landscape and that are kind of impacting the potential of industry to decarbonize. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nielsen. Through Lead It's example, we were able to learn that global cooperation, public and private partnership, and international collaboration constitute three very important components that makes up the vehicle that will drive us toward, that will move us toward a carbon neutral future. I look forward to hearing more about it in the panel discussions. And it's also very encouraging to hear that SEI and GTC jointly published a policy brief specifically for the P4G Green Technology session. From what Mr. Nielsen has told us, it promises to be a very good read, so I, for one, cannot wait to read it. Now, it's time for our next speaker. Our next speaker is Raimund Neugebauer, President of Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, Europe's largest application-oriented research organization.
Demographic development and its impact on our environment, climate and safety are the greatest global challenge of our time. With the 2020 agenda, member states of the United Nations, including the Republic of Korea and Germany, have therefore committed to 17 global targets to create a better future and preserve the natural foundations of life over the long term, without losing the balance of economic, ecological and social aspects. To contribute significantly to the UN SDGs, the EU has agreed under the European Green Deal to the goals of reducing greenhouse gas emission to 55% compared to 1990 until 2030, of achieving climate neutrality until 2050, of decarbonizing the energy system and expanded renewable energies, especially offshore wind, solar, water and geothermal energy. To achieve a greener EU economy, promoting innovations through research plays a key role. To create new innovative value chains, we need to deploy and showcase new technologies on a massive scale in all sectors and throughout the single market. Green innovations that reduce resource use and minimize negative environmental impacts are the key for creating sustainable value. Circular economy, energy and resource efficiency are hallmarks of action which are implemented by technologically diverse green innovations, for example, artificial intelligence for process and resource optimization, the use of green hydrogen or renewables for the reduction of fossil-based resources and emissions, green computing technologies for more energy efficiency, bioeconomy, bio-based materials to substitute fossil-based resources, as well as HPC and quantum computing for energy-efficient computing. In the following, I'd like to shortly address excellent activities on these topics. For the use of hydrogen, Fraunhofer has developed the action plan for fuel cell production and established an internal hydrogen network with over 30 Fraunhofer institutes. From an environmental and user-oriented view, fuel cells and hydrogen technologies have an advantage. However, sale price and infrastructure are market entry barriers. To address market issues, hydrogen production has to be cost-efficient, scalable and clean. To do so, Fraunhofer has several research projects, like NEO PEC, a tandem module for decentralized hydrogen supply due to photocatalytic water splitting, which not require electrolysis and is therefore much less expensive. For efficient storage and transport of hydrogen, Fraunhofer has developed a hydrogen storage substance called power paste with an exceptionally high specific energy and energy density for PEM fuel cell applications. This enhances the range for cars, vehicles or drones. Hydrogen technologies have to address the need of industry. Therefore, Fraunhofer implements a globally unique pilot hydrogen labs in several cities. Leuna in the near of Leipzig in Germany, Görlitz in the borderline to Poland, and Bremerhaven in the north and at the northwest coast, with an output of 26 megawatts. In the field of high-performance computing, Fraunhofer contributes within Euro HPC initiative to a modular computer architecture, performing high complex scientific calculations much more energy efficiently. With the stencil and tensor accelerator STX, Fraunhofer offers an accelerator processor for complex simulations, which can be used to improve energy efficiency through finite element calculations, for example. In the field of quantum computing, Fraunhofer is running the first German and European quantum computer with access for industry and research, allowing complex ecological, chemical and climate simulations or process and energy optimization to further increase sustainability. In the context of solar energy, Fraunhofer does research on the key topics of photovoltaics and systemic issues of the energy transition. Our scientific excellence is demonstrated by 4 world records in the field of photovoltaic technologies. This includes, for example, the efficient record for multi- and monocrystalline silicon of 22.3 and 26%, and a quadruple solar cell under concentrated sunlight of a remarkable 46%. Together with industry partners, Fraunhofer has continuously increased the efficiency of solar modules and developed process technologies necessary for high through output and reliability. Only together can we find answers to global challenges such as climate change. The expansion of international cooperation and technology partnerships is important, strengthens the transfer of knowledge and set new impulses for Germany and our international partners. Germany and Korea are already cooperating in the development and establishment of hydrogen technologies. Therefore, I'm very pleased that our Fraunhofer representative office Korea will establish a German-Korean hydrogen network this year and set up a platform where experts from both countries will meet to exchange ideas and identify topics for effective cooperation in hydrogen technologies. With focal points for Fraunhofer, for Germany, for Europe, and for the whole world, we are making a key contribution to meet European and international sustainability and climate goals, and even more importantly, to protecting planet Earth over the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Neugebauer, for sharing with us Fraunhofer's priorities, values, and also the challenges that it currently is facing. Cost is an issue, we cannot deny that, but we should always remember that creating a carbon neutral society is in all of our best interests, so it should always be a collective effort. So thank you for that. Now it's time for our next speaker. Our next speaker is Mez Nipper, CEO of the world's largest offshore wind power company, Ørsted.
Allow me for the next 5 minutes or so to share 3 things with you. First one is to share about the transformation that Ørsted has gone through as a company from being one of the most fossil fuel intensive utilities in Europe to now one of the world's renewable energy majors. Secondly, to take a view at what are some of the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead of us. And finally, what would be some good advice to business leaders all over the world to ensure that we all contribute with what we can to a more sustainable world. Let me take you 10 years back from when Ørsted was a utility that actually had 85% of our total energy generation from fossil fuels. At that time, we said, this is an unsustainable path. This is not going to work. It's not a future-proof business model, and it's not what we want to leave behind to the world. So we ended up making 2 bold visions at that time, saying that by 2040, we would reverse that and say that at least 85% of our generation would be renewable. So going from 85% fossil fuel based to 85% renewable in about 30 years' time. And secondly, we said that our major strategic bet, namely on offshore wind, we would take on the challenge to bring the power price down to a price per megawatt hour of less than €100. At that time, very few, if any, believed that any of that was possible. But now, less than a decade after that, actually by 2016, we reached a power price that was below €100 per megawatt hour for offshore. 4 years ahead of time of a 10-year journey. Something that nobody thought was possible in 10 years was possible in 6 years. So an exponential change. And secondly, by now, so by 2021, we've actually already decarbonized Ørsted by 86% of where we were 10 years ago. So also a much faster decarbonization. And as a matter of fact, we have 90% of our total energy generation being from renewable sources. So way ahead our 2040 ambition in 2021. This is something that was only possible because we had partnerships and trust from, for example, governments in the UK, in Denmark and Netherlands, where they went in to support the transformation and said, we will ensure that the regulatory frameworks with a price that is predictable, allowing us to make the necessary investments into the future in a wholehearted and substantial way. So those are some of the things that have worked incredibly well and ensure that the partnership between a company like Ørsted and the governments has actually generated results that were much, much better than anybody else had dared to dream of. Now, what's the next frontier? It is to get to 100% of our generation being fully carbon neutral by 2025, so in 4 years' time, and we are sure we will reach that. And secondly, to have our entire value chain, including our Scope 3 emissions, by 2040. We believe this is amongst the leading of any company in the world. Now, if we look at what are some of the opportunities that lie ahead of us, well, the build out of renewable energy that the world needs is immense. Let's take Korea as an example. The government there has set out a really bold ambition for 12 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. And we as a company have grabbed that opportunity and have now leaned in to develop the Incheon 1.6 gigawatt project, which is enough to decarbonize or get renewable energy to 1.3 million Korean households and can abate 4 million tons of CO2. And by the way, something that will create jobs and employment in society locally. Also on the next frontier is green hydrogen. This is something that the hard-to-abate sectors need. And there we believe that public-private partnerships are simply a fantastic opportunity to drive this forward. Allow me to finish with some good advice that all of us can ensure we tap into in leaving a better and more sustainable world behind. Well, if your company is not on a sustainable path, face the realities. Ensure that you actually see this is not a sustainable path. Have the courage and the boldness to make a vision and the courage to execute wholeheartedly. Have the rigor to follow up and ensure that you don't doubt your journey underway. Those are some of the things that have helped us on our transformation. And we are convinced that many, many other people not only could, but should do that. Because as business leaders, we should remember, we don't only have an opportunity, we have an obligation to leave a better world behind.
Thank you, Mr. Nipper. Ørsted's dedication to the environment and its cooperation with various governments illustrates how public and private partnership is crucial in meeting carbon neutral goals. Strong policies and bold investment and support from the government has made the market see the huge potential of offshore wind as a more profitable alternative energy source. Can't wait to hear more about that. So I think we are ready for the second panel discussion. On behalf of Mr. Medsnipper, Matthias Bausenwein, President of Ørsted Asia Pacific, will be joining the panel. Once again, Mr. Tyler Reich will preside over the panel discussion. So back to you, Tyler.
Hey there, everybody at home joining us again. Thank you for being with us today. Those were great presentations. Let's get our speakers on the screen so we can move straight into our discussion. Thank you all for your organization's presentations. I want to really get in. I have a kind of a strong opinion when it comes to the adoption of technology as a solution to the climate crisis. And just to give you some background to this opinion, and I'll get to my question, it's related. It's when you look at the history of the adoption of technology, just because it exists doesn't mean that we use it, right? So, for example, Augustin Mouchot developed a solar-powered steam energy generating facility and made it public in 1869, right? So clearly that may not have been financially viable at the time. Maybe there were reasons for which solar power didn't really make it into a steam energy-based economy when we were also looking at fossil fuels. But the reality is, just because it's there doesn't mean that it's used. So nowadays you see oftentimes, in the private sector, also in the government sector, John Kerry mentioned not too long ago that half the technologies that we need to address the climate crisis don't yet exist. So there's kind of this back and forth between we need to reinvent the wheel and, well, we already have a wheel, why aren't we using it? So what I want to ask all three of you, because you're all in different sectors, you're in policy, you're in academia, you're in the private sector. So when it comes to adaptation of a technology that can help reduce carbon pollution, and our impact in the environment. When it comes to adaptation, what do you think is being adopted right now? What is actually viable and being adopted right now? And what, if it is not being adopted, what technologies should be implemented immediately and what practices would go along with that? If you could speak to this, what types of technologies and practices are being adopted and which ones should be adopted, that would be really helpful. Let's start with Dr. Nielsen.
Thank you so much. Thank you for a good question. The issue of technology adoption is kind of a wide-ranging topic, and you might want to place the different technologies on a kind of maturity scale where things that are highly adopted right now and are reaching market maturity include things like renewable electricity and also electric vehicles, whereas things that are just in the kind of inception, takeoff, niche stage would be things like hydrogen storage and green hydrogen production. And also there, I would say, different facets of the bioeconomy and the bio-based resources that can be deployed for energy, food, fuel, fiber, which are located a little bit along this technology curve. So for me, adoption is really about, I fully agree with your notion that these initial technologies have been ready for sometimes over a century, like the electric vehicles, for example, is another example. But they don't take off. There are political and institutional reasons for that. But usually we're pretty good at getting things to the R&D output stage where you have niche products or prototypes, etc. And then there's a blockage, and there is the place where policy needs to become more active and not just let it sort of let it afloat on the big market sea where it will drown due to the competition if it goes out there too soon. So if we talk a little bit about policy later on, I'll be happy to develop a little bit what we've found around those types of policy measures.
Thank you. Professor Neugebauer, what do you think when it comes to the adaptation of technologies? What ones do you see being fastly adopted, and what kind of practices do you think need to be implemented to make adaptation go smoother?
If you look to the drivers, when we look to the drivers of the climate, of the impact from our activities to the climate. And then we can see the highest impact comes from the development of from the demographic development. We was in 1980 4.45 billion people, and now we are 7.75 people. And we have a consumption on materials, we have a consumption of energy, we have a consumption of food and a lot of other things. And when we look for this, today, nearly from the 7.7 people, we have 2 billion people which have are in a level like the European people, like the people in Korea, in Japan, in United States. 5 billion people are in movement, and they look for consumption, for products, and so on. And that brings us the main challenge to look for material consumption and for energy consumption. And we have a lot of technologies for lightweight construction, for minimum to bring products with a minimum of efforts of materials, and also in energy. And I think if we look to the energy technologies for hydrogen, we have hydrogen technologies, but we need to scale the technologies in a much larger level like today. We have a scalable problem. This is a problem, not the technology readiness level. The problem is the scalable problem.
Scalability. Right. Thank you. So, Mr. Pausenwein, let's talk to Mr. Pausenwein. So Ørsted started off as a fossil fuel company, is now basically a leader in terms of ocean-based wind farming, as far as I know. I'm from the Northeast United States, near Rhode Island, and I've actually heard a lot about your company in that area. So when it comes to adopting technologies, it seems like your company has moved a little bit faster than others. Is there, what type of adaptation in terms of new technologies and practices have proved really helpful for your company? Has it been, as Dr. Nielsen mentioned, was there a large policy aspect in terms of opening that door for your company?
Yeah, it's both. It's we have to have the right partnerships with the people who have to create support regimes for us. So at the same time, we need to scale technology up, as Professor Neugebauer just said. So it's if you look a bit at the question in general, adopting new technology is crucial for achieving carbon neutrality. And many of the technologies which are out there now, they are really good. I fully agree to that, but they may look far out. They may be risky to pursue. We don't know how to forecast what's going to happen. Obviously, we have floating wind, for example, for offshore. The technology-wise, pretty much advanced, but scaling it up, who takes the risk of building a large-scale offshore wind farm, floating, bring the cables together? That's, of course, more tricky. Maybe it's best to explain what I think needs to happen when we look back at how we made offshore wind, traditional offshore wind, bottom-fixed, scalable, commercially viable. Now it's moving into mainstream, but a few, let's say 20 years ago, it was an expensive proposition. It was something which was seen by everybody as extremely not affordable, and now it's a strategic decarbonization tool, which we really need under the cost levels of coal, gas, nuclear. We are at a point now where one turbine is double size of where the first wind farm was in 1991. The first wind farm, Winnerby, was 5 megawatt in total, and now one turbine of a large-scale wind farm in the UK, for example, is 12 megawatt, and the whole wind farm is 1.2 gigawatt. That's only possible through big technology development and adapting it. And why? How did that work? I think it is a combination of what we said. We need the support at the beginning from the governments. Not so easy to pick the right technology, but strong support is needed to kickstart an industry. a long-term stable framework to allow for investment. And then it is also important that bold decisions are taken. And sometimes it's a bit of luck. When we made the transition from black to green, it was, of course, a strong push from the government. It was also a very bold strategic decision, also based on a lot of analysis. But it was also a bit lucky that it was the right timing. Because as you said, it can be the wrong timing, and then the best technology in the world and the best idea in the world doesn't bring you to the next level. But it needs commitment and bold entrepreneurial decisions at the end as well.
Thank you. So I have a question that's not in my list that I really do want to ask Dr. Nielsen about this scalability question. So is public policy or just the governmental sector, is there something that governments or policy can do to solve scalability problems for new technologies? Or is that really just a scientific, viability issue?
Yeah, I think there is a lot we can do in policy making that addresses the so-called valley of death between new technologies emerging and their large-scale deployment. We did in Sweden a exercise called Fossil Free Sweden, which has produced roadmaps of industries, 22 different industries that I mentioned in my keynote speech. And with those roadmaps comes like a shopping list for options for policymakers. How can they make the enabling environment for this to become a reality? And it's not about investing a lot in R&D. It's actually about taking those scaling steps. So examples of this is to build a green investment bank where we create sort of a bridge in the information gap that the commercial banks are not able to handle. So building the industry projects which require a little bit more than R&D and innovation investment. Another item is to reduce the risk of scaling when you have these technology leaps. For example, the concept of carbon contract for difference, which is kind of to have a security around a higher carbon price on the European carbon price market. So to reduce the financial risk in these investments. Another aspect which is often forgotten about is to build the competence in the professions to be deployed in these new sectors. I'm sure that Ørsted is experiencing this. You need very highly qualified technical skills that are not always immediately available to, for example, install ocean-based wind power. It's a very complicated and risky business that requires high skills. So larger scale education and competence development. And then finally, the supporting infrastructures, which has to do with power transmission of renewable electricity, which has to do with hydrogen networks that are not going to emerge on the private market on its own. There's like the whole supporting ecosystems that will provide these energies that are required for the transition. So I think these are like sets of policies for scaling, which have been a little bit neglected. And that has been the most rewarding thing about the fossil-free roadmaps in my country, is that they have come into the spotlight more clearly, because the solutions and technologies are there, and they are just standing there waiting to take off. But there are a couple of things that need to happen before they can really move.
Thank you so much for that response. It was really, really enlightening, and it's exactly what I was interested in hearing. It brings me to my next question as well, because you mentioned, there are some things that are sitting there and some tasks that are waiting to be done. So all three of you are in different sectors, but I would like you to maybe take a moment to speak to some major challenges in your sector surrounding the tasks that must be done to accomplish getting carbon neutral and implementing those technologies. So what are some tasks that you see in front of you in your field, whether that's in terms of policy or scientific development or in the private sector? What are some tasks in front of you that are challenging and need to be addressed? Let's start with Mr. Bausenbein.
Yeah, I think, of course, we need to take action as we did as Ørsted a few decades ago. We need to take action again, and we're willing to do so, take ownership and responsibility as a company. On the hydrogen side, green hydrogen has now been mentioned a couple of times. We have now started a few partnerships, actually about 9 pilot projects now. One just broke ground last week. We started constructing a small 2 megawatt demonstration project powered by 2 of our onshore wind turbines at 1,000 kilos a day. So it's a start, and we have several projects of these, and we also go in and very committed in trying to make these demonstration projects happen and show success stories. Because success stories have always been very good to kickstart the next level of policy making as well, and unlock maybe more support from different sides. In general, I think big challenges are we have, of course, proven a lot in Europe now. Offshore wind is a northwestern European technology spreading into the world. You mentioned you're from the East Coast. It's starting there now. It's scaling up. We're sitting here in Asia. We have to basically do a lot of groundwork still, and that we need to bring our know-how into the new markets while not forgetting that also in the new markets, the policymakers, the government wants to also build up an industry, wants to build up technology know-how as a country or as a region. So we need to bring this together, align everyone under the same vision, and then make a step-by-step approach to also achieve the net zero goals globally. And I like the example which was given by Mr. Nielsen about talent and the right level of qualifications, because that's an excellent example of how to scale also globally. We are extremely comfortable from an engineering perspective. We have constructed under 4 typhoons in the first demo project in Taiwan. We have earthquake-proven design. We know how to man the ships. But what we don't have always is available talent and the right engineering skills in these markets where we are. And of course, we want to build up strong regional or strong local teams. And when we then come to the markets where we really need to speed up offshore wind or hydrogen or whatever it may be, then people are still not so inclined to join just this industry because it's a new industry, right? They want to go into semiconductor or some established other industries, and we need to do a lot to convince them that they're again back to the success stories, showing that these projects work and are spinning out there in the sea. That attracts a lot more talent, and then it becomes a bit more self-fulfilling and more dynamic. And I think that's a big challenge, but we're dealing with it.
Thank you. I actually never expected to hear a response that talent acquisition in diverse markets would be a challenge, but it clearly is. So how about you, Professor Neugebauer, at the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft? What do you see as sort of immediate tasks and challenges in scientific technology?
If you allow, I will give at first a comment again to what can the government do to enable scale up of technologies. It's a great topic in our country. We have in the last time realized so-called real labs. In a real lab, you have not only special conditions from the technical side and for the research side, the specialists, you have also special conditions to bring down barriers by regularities, that you have more freedom to operate by law also for the research. It's a very important point. And then we have for different very, very important technologies, for example, hydrogen technology, for quantum technologies, for high-performance computing technologies. You know, we require for high-performance computing a lot of energy in the future. We have special national agendas, and from the national agendas, in the national agenda, we have platforms for the cooperation of industry, science, research institutes, universities, and also from the politics. And this is very fruitful. This was very fruitful in the last years. And often this leads to important projects of common European interest. And then we get a strong push for the industry, and we scale up a lot of technologies. And I think this is a very excellent tool from the national side and also from the European side. And your question, what have we to do in science? Of course, also the research organizations have to look for their own consumption of energy and resources and so on. And in our case, for the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, we have decided that we have also started a lot of activities that we bring Fraunhofer until 2030 to neutrality for carbon dioxide.
Thank you, Professor Norgevall. And lastly, Dr. Nielsen, what do you see in terms of immediate tasks that need to be addressed or challenges that need to be addressed in terms of policy?
Yeah, very high on the agenda right now is to find ways of sending, sort of having consistent signals to investors and the financial system. What is green investment and what is not? This is a very hot topic with the EU taxonomy, but it's also very complicated as it turns out. As you'll have, it's not just like a green sector, but it's also industries that are currently not so green, but they are in a transition. And what does that pathway look like? And what is a good pathway and what is not? Super challenging policy and research work to do. And I'll say another one is carbon border adjustments, which we've touched upon in the joint study with the Green Technology Center. It's a principally sound economic idea that has been around for 3-4 decades, but which is now becoming very urgent as we are witnessing the transition in heavy industry. And the EU has a sharp policy proposal. But how do you do this? And how do you make sure that it doesn't disrupt the good trade that we want to have globally? And that it creates positive incentives instead of protectionism. This is a real puzzle to work on for us and others over the coming years.
Thank you so much for your response. You know, just speaking with you guys today has just been such an honor, and I would love to spend so much more time speaking with you because it's so fascinating. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for our discussion at this moment. Thank you so much for joining us from different time zones. Everything that you've said has been very informative, and I hope everybody who's watching right now follows all of you on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever it is that you're using. I certainly will do the same. Thank you so much for joining us. Wow, yeah, this is amazing. Can I just geek out for a second here? This is just so cool. So much to learn about, and really solving this problem is very interdisciplinary. I'm sure everybody watching at home right now is also being really inspired by our speakers, and we have another group for you, so please stay tuned.
Thank you, Tyler, and also for geeking out. You're allowed to do that. Now let's go on to the third and final session. The topic for the third session is Partnership to Facilitate Global Carbon Neutrality. And to help you visualize what we mean by that, we've prepared a short video. Let's watch. Animated videos are always helpful tools to envision the future because it's so hopeful. That was a very interesting way to be reminded of the importance of international partnership in bringing in a brighter future. So with that said, let's start the third session. Our first speaker is Inger Andersen, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program. The UNEP is the leading global environmental authority, and it sets the global environmental agenda and serves as an authoritative advocate for the global environment. Please welcome Executive Director Andersen.
Thank you for inviting me to speak at the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit. Special thanks to the Korean Republic's Ministry of Science and ICT for convening this session on the role of green technology in driving us towards a net zero future ahead. Look, the science is clear. Without action, without transformation in our food systems, in our energy systems, and in how we produce and consume, we're headed to a world that is warmer by more than 3 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. Even as we suffer through the tragedy of the global pandemic, this is a world we cannot begin to imagine. But the good news is that science has told us what we need to do. We need to reduce emissions by 45% by 2030 and to reach net zero by 2050. The biggest responsibility for this transformation rests with the G20 countries, which account for 78% of all emissions. We must use the COVID-19 stimulus and recovery packages to kickstart a green recovery because we have the technology to decarbonize. Investing in proven and cost-effective technologies such as solar and wind energy, such as green buildings, smart grids, green infrastructure, efficient appliances, and circular technologies that allow us to retain the value of resources is good for business, for jobs, and for the environment. And here I congratulate the government of the Republic of Korea for one of the strongest green recovery programs announced in 2020, which includes a move to a green digital economy. There's much that we can do, so allow me to highlight 3 big opportunities. First, energy efficiency is a low-hanging fruit to solve the climate crisis. Technologies that improve the energy efficiency of every appliance and building that draws power are available and offer us an important short-term measure to reduce power demand while we shift to renewables. And second, as our planet continues to warm and as power demand soars, we must invest in and popularize better cooling technologies. Technological solutions that are nature-based, sustainable, and integrate cold chains or passive cooling solutions in buildings are critical. And I'm pleased to hear of the Korean government's efforts in this direction. And third, as the global methane assessment released by UNEP and partners just a few weeks ago revealed, technologies to contain methane emissions can avoid nearly 0.3 degrees Celsius of global warming by 2045. But technology must travel along with the funding that makes it possible. Technology must be relevant and customizable. Technology must be affordable. Technology must be available to all, or it simply won't work. Excellencies, as you may recall, parties to the UN Climate Change Convention created the Climate Technology Center and Network, which provides technical assistance to developing countries on climate adaptation and mitigation technologies. UNEP is proud to host the CTCN and to count on the Republic of Korea as one of its key donors and partners. Ladies and gentlemen, our actions in the next decade will determine whether we will leave behind a healthy and sustainable future for the generations that follow. Green technologies and digital technologies will be a huge part of the enabling ecosystem that allows us to replace yesterday's carbon-intensive approaches by supporting innovation in business models, in processes, and in organization. Because we have the tools to achieve a net zero future for people and for the planet, I look forward to hearing about the outcomes of this important event, and I thank you for your commitment.
Thank you. Director Andersen emphasized the essential role of technology and science and how universal access to them is so crucial because the fight to save our planet should be a collective one. And also, the fight to save our planet is our own doing, so we should always remember that what we do now will determine our legacy. So thank you for your speech. And our next speaker is Chung Byung-gi, President of the Green Technology Center. GTC, as a government-affiliated research institute, is committed to developing national policies and strategies for inclusive and innovative growth of global community, facilitating technology transfer and seeking cooperation opportunities that respond to climate change and carbon neutrality.
Hello, distinguished guests and audience. My warm greetings to you all. My name is Byung-gi Chung, President of Green Technology Center of Korea. I'm very pleased to give you this keynote speech today, and in the next 5 minutes or so, I'd like to share my perspectives on how Korea may achieve rapid green transformation toward carbon neutrality. As the phrase miracle on the Han River refers to, Korea has achieved such a remarkable post-war economic development in such a short time span. While we were a resource-poor nation, we were able to experience exponential growth by innovating technologies and industries. The potential growth rate of the Korean economy, however, had been on a downward trend for the last 20 years, warning the Korean policymakers to find new engines for growth. As Korea enters another turning point for innovation, we are faced with a significant and urgent moment to achieve carbon neutrality. Korea is a latecomer to the global movement for carbon neutrality, about 30 years behind those of other advanced nations, and we cannot delay our actions anymore to achieve our net zero goal by 2050. It is particularly more challenging to Korea because we rely most of our energy supply and consumption on fossil fuel-based generation and large greenhouse gas emitting sectors, leading our export-oriented economy. On the other hand, the international investment trend is heading rapidly toward low-carbon assets and activities, urging policymakers and industry leaders to take swift actions for the wave of new measures such as carbon border taxes, renewable energy 100, and ESG management. Given the urgency, carbon neutrality must be achieved through a rapid process of green transformation. The question is, can you do that? How? I would like to share a thought on that with you. Korea has highly advanced information and communication technologies, and I believe it should utilize these technologies to achieve rapid green transformation in two ways. First, ICT expands the application window and enhances the efficiency of energy technologies. Together with decarbonization and decentralization, digitalization has risen as a new paradigm for energy transition. An International Energy Agency recently predicted energy-efficient technologies, along with renewable energy technologies, will be key players in mitigating emissions in the next couple of decades. Consequently, ICT-based energy-efficient technologies applied to building, factory, and community energy management systems and transport sectors, etc., attracting attention as future drivers of low-carbon development. In fact, the Korean New Deal, launched last year, aims to accelerate green transformation through innovative projects by combining digital technologies with green infrastructures. Secondly, ICT is important because it serves to increase the demand size acceptance to new technologies and to raise the efficiency of technology development processes through inclusive partnerships. ICT offers communication channels that transcend time and space, through which stakeholders can engage in various activities and thereby increasing their solidarity and cooperation. Also, it is a key driver that can mobilize the participation of socially vulnerable and alienated groups. In the midst of coronavirus pandemic, we truly witnessed the power of ICT, how ICT-based platforms allow various forms of socialization, and its potential to strengthen inclusiveness beyond borders. Now, please allow me to briefly introduce Green Technology Center in light of what I stated in terms of innovative technologies and inclusive partnerships. Green Technology Center is a government-funded research institute aiming to become a pathfinder to carbon neutrality. We support technology innovation, national R&D projects by utilizing information platforms on green and climate technologies. We also expand inclusive partnerships by transferring climate technologies to developing countries through clusters of industry, academia, research institutes, and climate technology cooperative platforms such as the CTCN and P4G. By integrating the two platforms, we wish to build an online ecosystem of open innovation, expand inclusive partnership through it, and in the end, contribute to achieving global as well as national carbon neutrality. Wrapping up my keynote speech, I'd like to highlight that carbon neutrality sets a new direction for cooperation while offering many new opportunities. As a middle power, Korea should use its advanced green and digital technologies to bridge technology gaps between developed and developing countries, and promote inclusive partnerships of various stakeholders to strengthen and accelerate global solidarity in order to achieve the common challenge of carbon neutrality and sustainable development. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.
Thank you. As Dr. Jung said, we cannot stress enough the importance of ICT and inclusive partnership in achieving carbon neutrality. And Dr. Jung has painted a very descriptive picture of Korea's commitment to become a bridge that connects advanced and developing nations so that more countries can actively engage in implementing green technology. So thank you. Now it's time for our final panel discussion. On behalf of Executive Director Inger Anderson, Mark Radka, Acting Director of UNEP, is with us today. Back to you, Tyler.
Thanks for joining us again on our third and final discussion in today's session on green technology. As you just saw in those speeches, it's very clear that partnership, as P4G emphasizes, is important to the adaptation and implementation of technologies to solve the climate crisis. Let's get the speakers on the screen and get straight into our discussion. So my first question actually is for Mark at the UNEP. So obviously, the UN is an international organization, and you're focused on really creating a space within which people can cooperate to solve this global climate crisis. So when it comes to creating and facilitating collaboration around technology, how can partnerships be designed, implemented, and leveraged to make that collaboration go more smoothly?
I think in our experience, there's nothing unique really about climate technology transfer, and so there's a great deal that we can learn from other international successes. And to point out that the challenges internationally are often, just to sort of mirror what challenges exist at the national level. Often. It is complex, of course, and we spend a lot of time in the UN making these theories of change and looking at the pathways through which, let's say, different barriers that are linked in complex ways could be overcome. But so often, what we find is the real barrier is the lack of a good, predictable, forward-looking government policy regarding technology. And often that hinges on lack of information or confidence to act on the information. So in a sense, the knowledge and confidence to act. And getting accurate knowledge and the confidence in which to make good government policy often depends critically on the information that's provided by the public sector, institutions and so on, but critically on the private sector. I mean, the private sector is the engine of development. It is the place where new ideas, are hatched in a sense through research and development. So our concept of a good public-private partnership involves multiple parts of the private sector. So financial institutions, companies, insurers, research laboratories, and so on. But to augment these with the advice and the public acceptability that often comes from bringing in non-governmental organizations. So we'd like to develop very rich partnerships that can give confidence to governments to take good policies and put in place. A very good example is in the area of energy efficiency. Inger mentioned the importance of near-term technologies. I think earlier one of you mentioned that John Kerry said half the technologies don't yet exist. Well, that means half do exist. And earlier speakers spoke about the barriers of why can't we just put these in place? Right. Well, good information on benefits and costs is essential. Good information on experience in the countries or jurisdictions where technologies have been taken up and proved to be really in the social to the social benefit. So we develop these sorts of rich partnerships. We bring people together, and out of that eclectic mix often comes good advice for governments.
Thank you for your response. That's actually just such an insightful response to hear. I never really thought that confidence would be an issue, but it's clear that it is, and using information to build that confidence so that people can move forward together is clearly really important. It brings me to my next question, which is actually for Dr. Jung. So, Dr. Jung, that's pretty much a field that you're working in, right? So GTC actually uses information and communications technologies to try to build partnerships in developing countries to eventually implement technologies to address the climate crisis. So can you give me some examples of how the GTC goes about creating these information pathways or using this ICT to create those partnerships?
Okay, thank you for the question. In recent years, actually, GTC has carried out quite a few technology cooperation projects with the developing countries on the basis of their specific demands with Korea's advanced ICT grafted into them. Many developing countries are actively applying and deploying ICT to improve efficiency of their existing infrastructures. To give a specific example, GTC has implemented a pilot transportation project in Bhutan back in 2017, building low-carbon bus information system with the Korean ICT applied to it. This project was approved by the Green Climate Fund as a project preparation facility to assist the stakeholders in Bhutan with preparing funding proposals to make it a full-fledged GCF project. Furthermore, I guess that's the answer probably to your question. ICT contributes to increasing developing countries' acceptance to new technologies by strengthening solidarity and cooperation through efficient communications among various stakeholders. The IoT for Mekong Delta project was a P4G public-private partnership based on cooperation among 3 countries, which are Korea, Denmark, and Vietnam, aiming to improve water management and prevent water disasters in the Mekong Delta region in Vietnam. ICT plays especially significant roles in situations like the COVID-19 pandemic, enabling simultaneous communications beyond borders and over different time zones when direct contacts are remitted. These positive effects of ICT were also actually witnessed in this project, increasing solidarity and cooperation with the local Vietnamese through a rapid exchange of ideas and information. So in short, we can confidently say that ICT promotes and strengthens inclusive partnerships.
Right. So I guess ICT is almost like an infrastructure for partnerships in a way. So to go back to Mark, you mentioned briefly public-private partnerships, and the ideal types of partnerships would include, financial organizations, et cetera, et cetera. Could you get a little bit more into this structure of a public-private partnership? What are the core roles that need to be filled to have an effective public-private partnership around technology?
Well, I would say that the governments clearly have the role in setting a good, predictable, realistic environment for the policies and regulations in a manner that gives confidence to the private sector. With that confidence, they can invest in the future, in a sense, with some secure sense that things will proceed as agreed. Of course, governments are looking at the public interest, both the short term and the long term. So their interest is usually broader than that of the private sector. Although, as many of the speakers mentioned, that is beginning to shift in a very welcome way. And the private sector is of course the one that has to then do most of the heavy lifting. Of course, with new technologies, we've heard that sensible government policies and financial mechanisms can help defray the cost of early stage R&D. They can provide sort of insurance for when experiments in new technology don't work out as planned. But essentially, it's that policy environment and then unleashing the private sector in a way that channels the creativity in a direction that serves the public good.
Thank you for your response. My next question is for Dr. Chung. Actually, you mentioned just a moment ago inclusivity. Inclusivity is such an interesting word. Why is inclusivity so important? And what is it that you expect to see from P4G in terms of inclusivity?
Well, there appear to be two factors that determine successful technology cooperation, which are scalability and the sustainability of a project. In order to secure these two factors, actually, we must build, expand, and deepen inclusive partnerships. To enable inclusive partnerships, we must create environments where various stakeholders, especially the private sector, can actively participate in the partnerships. Creating mechanisms that incentivize or reward participation could mobilize greater participation by the private sector. We therefore must find more cost-effective ways to encourage the private sector's participation by, for example, cooperating with the public sector and thereby lowering the prospect of risk hedging. The existing UN system actually allows legitimate and active participation of the private sector and developing countries in international carbon emission trading markets and the cooperation activities for technology transfer. Most noticeably, a Korean company actually transferred its water purification technology to Bangladesh through the climate technology localization project of the Korean Ministry of Science and ICT in 2019. As a result, the target region in Bangladesh secured the supply of clean water, and the Korean company earned emission reduction credits, and P4G is a platform that promotes public and private partnerships outside the UN system. Besides, therefore, facilitating projects among governments, corporations, and civil societies,
The P4G should become a global platform to include a greater scope of stakeholders, such as global think tanks, so that they are provided with the opportunities to demonstrate their strengths and capacities of designing incentive-based mechanisms for the private sector. If P4G could play these roles successfully, I think it can become a pathfinder, presenting guidance and directions to many private and public partners who face uncertainties of the new paradigm of ESG management and a wave of new standards for asset and corporate management. So P4G should utilize the unique characters and positive attributes to catalyze communications throughout a global scope of private and public stakeholders, consolidating technology-based inclusive partnerships for those inside and outside the UN system. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. I'd actually like to continue on that question and send it over to Mark. From your perspective at the UNEP, P4G it's a relatively new forum. This is the second P4G that's being hosted. The first was in Denmark. So from the UNEP's perspective, what hopes do you have for P4G, and what role can P4G play to sort of, what would be the good word, to fit in almost in a collaboration with the UNEP and create this ecosystem of international cooperation?
Well, we're in favor of anything like P4G that really brings together leading governments and the private sector, because it's so important now to have models for cooperation, particularly models that adopt a very forward-looking, altruistic, cooperative sort of ethos from the get-go. P4G stands out for me in fulfilling those criteria, and we have cooperated with P4G and within UNEP, and I think it's safe to say other parts of the UN system. We were actually, for one of our programs, a recipient of a P4G award, and that was for work that we undertook with some of the companies involved in P4G that took European, I would say, best practices in district energy systems and helped spread approaches and as I mentioned, knowledge about district energy and in particularly district cooling in countries, developing countries where the demand for cooling is skyrocketing. And I think we would not have been as effective in that had it not been for organizations like P4G. Or efforts like P4G. So it's a very good model, and we can only look at it with admiration and consider it to be a fellow traveler.
Thank you. I also have a lot of hopes for P4G. As we come to a close with our discussion, I have one more question I'd like to throw at both of you. Either of you can take a swing at it. Both of you could take a swing at it. But tons of different, very diverse people are watching this forum, whether they're in the private sector, the public sector, they could be in local or national government, they could be young people, entrepreneurs, business owners. When someone is in the position where in their organization they're thinking, we need to make partnerships in our organization with somebody in a completely different field, right, in order to address that organization's climate goals. What would you say to a person that's working in an organization that needs to accomplish that? What would you say as like your first go-to in developing a structure for a partnership? Where should this person go if they're working in a company or a local government?
I think the real answer probably depends on what sector you're in and what country you're in. But the first thing I like to do is look for a good model. See what else is out there, because there really are so many good examples, and often we're thinking about getting to scale rather than reinventing or starting afresh as if you're the first person to come up with a good idea. So a little bit of homework to find out who else has done this, who's been down this path, how did they structure it, what type of partners did they bring together, I think that's a really wise investment. And the answer, of course, well, it depends a lot on whether you're, in what type of economic environment you're operating, and what particular technology or area is of interest.
Great, thank you for your response. Dr. Jung, would you have anything to say in terms of where someone should go in their organization to establish a partnership?
Well,
Nah.
yeah, I basically have the same opinion as Dr. Edka. Essentially, of course, it depends on what kind of, need do you have right now for your, partnership. But I think that, as he said, I try to find a good practice model, for your, Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I have a follow-up quick question for that about, so at GTC, do you also publish, or how should somebody who wants to learn from GTC, where should they go to see the projects that you've conducted?
Well, come to the homepage, please.
Yeah. Great. Okay, thank you. Well, I think that's all the time we have for this final discussion for today. I'd like to thank both of you for taking the time to join us. I know we're all in different places. I think that this whole forum has been really helpful for a lot of people watching. Thank you for today.
Thank you very much. It's a great opportunity.
Well, that is awesome, and it was unfortunately our last discussion in this session on green technology. However, P4G is continuing. This is not the last thing that you will see from P4G. If you have not yet had the opportunity, please follow P4G on any social media out there and keep your eyes open, because more partnerships and more technology and more efforts are going to be showing up in your field, and there are a lot of opportunities for you to go out and help to solve the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler, for leading the discussions. That was the third and final session for the Green Technology session. Now, with eminent speakers from home and abroad, we've been able to chart the path for a greener future. Now, all we have to do is act. Act on what we've learned today and become pathfinders in our own ways and pioneer the way to a carbon neutral society. I'd like to thank all the speakers, all the panelists, and of course our moderators, and of course to all the participants who stayed with us until the very end. This concludes the Green Technology session. It was an honor being your MC. Thank you.